Wells, I mean, this film, Other Side of the Wind, is near the total opposite of Gene Dealman. It's a little over 2 hours, 2 hours and 2 minutes, and there's so many ways you can read. Uh, in my mind, it reminds me in a lot of ways of Andrei Rublev by Tarkovsky. And that when I first watched that, I was like, "This is a very good film, but it has some flaws." This film has some flaws too, but the flaws even work in favor of the film. Is it? Is it? I mean, The Other Side of the Wind is the film that the character played by John Huston is he's basically doing a satire of Antonioni's The Brisky Point, if you've ever seen that. And then outside, there's a very Stardust Memories like this film is right there. It's better than 8.5, and it's different, but it's just as good as Stardust Memories in dealing with the filmmaker as artist. And there's so much in that film. And the thing is, as I'm getting sort of assaulted by this film, I'm able to put these things in order, and it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and it's fascinating to watch, and it's great to watch. It goes back and forth between color and black and white. And this is a guy who was doing this on a shoestring budget over 5 or 6 years. And then I look at like Gene Dealman, it took like 14 days, I think, to shoot the thing. And that you can't. I mean, it's ridiculous sight and sound. Even if, for example, if this was the only film we knew of this guy Orson Welles, it's so far above this Gene Dealman. It's ridiculous. He's on a totally different level as an artist. And I could say the same thing about Kubrick. That's why I was thinking to myself, my God, because I was watching something about Kubrick yesterday on YouTube too, and it's like, who's greater? I mean, is it? And these are the two titans. Wells started off getting everything handed to him, became an indie filmmaker because he was shunned. Kubrick started out as an indie filmmaker, got everything handed to him, and was praised. Uh, they Wells molded his vision to what the story was. He was the ultimate form and function guy. Kubrick he imposed his will on film. And you look at something like this, Gene Dealman. Well, I saw that on one of I forget whether this the director's one. You have Spike Lee do The Right Thing, which is a cardboard cutout. I mean, it's not a great film. There's some great cinematography here and there, but it's by no means a great film. I look at Vertigo from 10 years ago, which topped it, and that's a mediocre. It's probably got the worst performance from Jimmy Stewart that I've seen, and it's got terrible acting in other parts. And Citizen Kane, which I think is certainly a great film. I don't think it was ever the greatest film. I put it probably maybe fourth or fifth out of Wells's film. This film I just mentioned, Other Side of the Wind, is overall it's a more dazzling, made with by the different standards, a lot less money. It's just brilliant and it's dazzling. Chimes at Midnight is the same way. The trial. I mean, the 1960s. He was just kicking it from The Trial to Chimes at Midnight, and then into the 70s with this and F the Fake. I mean, he was making magic out of nothing. I mean, I would argue that Orson Welles was probably, I would have to give him slightly over Kubrick, and I'd say that he was one of the top 4 or 5 artists of the 20th century in any art form. I mean, just watching this, and that this is a 60-something-year-old man who's got, in that one film, he does more than Kubrick has done. Not Kubrick, Spielberg has done in his whole career. And how does a movie like this, Gene Dealman, get up there? It's a joke.
I've never seen Chimes at Midnight, but
You can
do you
get it.
think?
You can get it on YouTube. The whole movie.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that the trial from Wells is better than Franz Kafka's book? Because it seems like it is.
Well, it's set in the modern day too.
Yeah.
But with one exception, the ending with the explosion is just silly. And I think
Hmm.
that was another example where his financiers, they didn't want just the book ends with the dagger being passed and forth and he's about to be stabbed, or maybe he is stabbed, but there's the back. I think it's just passing back and forth. Other than that, literally the last 10-15 seconds of that film, yeah, I think it is better than.
You mentioned. What? Say you watched the Michael Haneke's The Castle.
I was just going to say that.
Okay.
Wait, what are we talking about?
So we watched a film by Michael Haneke, a German director, Austrian. And it
This
was based,
this narcissism of German, no, Austrian,
yeah,
Russian, no, Ukrainian. You're the
yeah,
same fucking people. Give me a
the
break.
the so it was based on the Castle, which is after the Metamorphosis and the Trial is probably the most well-known work, and it's unfinished. And it was a very interesting film. It's not in a league with the couple of films we were talking about, not in a league with the public, but it was a good film. And you know, it 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 really portrayed a lot of that too. Just yesterday, before I watched a documentary that was sent to me by someone I won't name, um, uh, I watched about 35-40 minutes of this Mr. Turner, which was a Mike Leigh film. And after about 35-40 minutes, I've seen some of the contemporary Mike Leigh. This was about J.M.W. Turner, the painter.
Mhm.
I guess he's considered an impressionist. But he does all those cloudy seascapes and landscapes and whatnot.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites from the era.
Yeah, but I watched 35-40 minutes, and it's just like all this guy is this chubby asshole who just farts around. I said, this is like watching Scrooge with a paintbrush. There was no point to it. But it was still better than Gene Dealman, the 35-40 minutes. But having gone through the Dealman thing, I was like, I'm not going to watch this. I mean, after 35-40 minutes, you can't interest me. If I had been alone, I probably would have nodded off. But Jessica was there.
One thing I noticed is that in the poll, the director's poll is definitely better than the critics poll.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I'm not sure exactly who they're asking because it's directors, academics, no. For the critics, it's academics and that kind of thing as well. For the directors, it's actual working directors. I don't know exactly who they asked, but for whatever reason, maybe it's just kind of random, maybe not. But the directors poll is definitely better. I think that the top 10 on the directors poll, the majority of those films are great films, whereas for the critics poll, it's like maybe a quarter to half, and their rankings of like something like Taxi Driver versus Goodfellas, right? It's better. It's better in the directors poll.
I think Taxi Driver fell out of the top.
In the top 10, but it's still there, and in the directors poll, it's higher than I think Goodfellas.
Now, I don't think, for example, any Cassavetes movies are on there, and certainly his best one.
There's okay, there is one. What do you think it is?
Woman Under the Influence.
Yeah,
and that to me is one of his less one. It's not a bad film, but I don't think it's not up there with Opening Night. It's not up there with Chinese Bookie, and it's not up there with Faces. But yeah, that's that, and so you see here, even someone as niche as Cassavetes, they go with the least niche one.
And also specifically with the politically correct one, right? I mean, because there's this kind of overlap with like feminist readings or whatever. It's interesting because when I was watching this film, I thought besides comparisons to Repulsion, you could also make a comparison, or rather a contrast, right, in terms of perhaps maybe what they both wanted to do with the Cassavetes film Faces, because I mean, both of them are long, both of them are focused on sort of day to day, minute kind of interactions. At least in the outset, right? I can imagine viewers of both films think that both of those films are equally boring. Whereas my argument for Faces would be, if you look at the kind of interactions that everybody's having, little by little, even if they're sort of like bullshitting or not much seems to be being said, you start noticing, in this kind of logic of drunkenness, little by little, right? You could have a minute to minute. There's definitely a change that occurs, tonally, psychologically, and then it's followed up by something else. Then there's a reverb somewhere else. And there's this kind of constant, interplay with these kinds of changes where, but you're watching it and it seems, if you're not really paying attention, that not much is going on. So like, I mean, like this is a film to try to do something similar, but there's literally actually nothing going on. If she's just, sitting there, there's like one point where she's just like sitting there for about, I think, almost 10 minutes, just kind of like staring at a wall. There's literally nothing that's going on, right? Nothing is actually being said in those moments. So that was another contrast that I thought of when watching the two.
Yeah, the and the thing is, the whole thing with that poll is they don't rank. They don't ask to rank your 10 top films. 10 to number one or what. It's just pick your top 10 films in whatever order. So I think out of like 1,600, I think Gene Dealman was named on something like 46,
Hmm.
and so literally 46 out of 1,600. What is the percentage of that? That's like 1/10 of a quarter. That's you're picking it appeared on like two and a half
Maybe
percent.
everything else appeared like twice or three times, or maybe only 40 times. Maybe this is the only one that appeared 46 times, which is why it's ranked number one, you know?
Yeah,
But but then
that's it.
but then also like I would wonder, like, so first of all, I never even heard of this movie. I don't know how important it is cinematically. It seems based on what, directors and others are saying, it seems to have some role historically, but it really did sort of come out of nowhere. And
Well,
it also
think
it
I
all seemed
think
to
it
come at the
first
same
appeared
time,
in I think it first appeared in 92, and it was like in the several hundred down. Then in '02 it got up to
Hmm.
like in the top 100, and then it was like number 34 or something a decade ago. But I mean, there are certainly films that shouldn't be anywhere in there from the old time. The Rules of the Game, that French film from the '30s. I remember
Hmm.
watching that and being like, I mean, how the hell that got in? I don't know. The River, for example, by Renoir. I've seen it. I like it. It's a good, solid film, but it's not a great film. Uh, that should never have been up there. Um, uh, other films that have been up there. I'm sure you have. I'm trying to think of more modern ones. Vertigo was ridiculous. Vertigo is just like with I mentioned Citizen Kane. I wouldn't put it in the top 4 or 5 necessarily, and maybe it's number 4 or 5 in his canon. But Vertigo, I wouldn't even put in the top 10 of Hitchcock. And I'm not. I don't think Hitchcock is a popcorn movie maker. He's not someone deep. He's not Wells. He's not Bergman. He's not any of these truly great and visionary artists. And Vertigo, it's ridiculous that it's up there. That it ever was number one, and I mean it's a better choice I think than Gene Dealman simply because there's some action, but there's also parts of it that are
Hmm.
worse. The acting by the blonde in that movie, whose name I forget, who plays the two roles. I mean, she's absolutely horrendous. But then again, there's really no passionate, no great acting that we see in Gene Dealman because basically they're cardboard cutouts. They're zombies. Like you said, I guess the deepest part is supposed to be where we find out that her son is, is probably just yanking himself in his bed at night or whatnot.